Rachel Carson was a brilliant writer, journalist, environmentalist, and activist. In 1932, she received her MA in zoology from Johns Hopkins University. She worked as a writer and editor for the U.S. Bureau of Fisheries and the Baltimore Sun, and then later in life worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as editor-in-chief. Her first two books were Under the Sea in 1941 and The Sea Around Us in 1951, which helps to establish her in the scientific field. In 1962, Carson released Silent Spring, a 155-page book about the environmental damage that Monsanto Corporation had committed and how life was being destroyed by chemicals, especially DDT. Often referred to by media as a muckraker, one able to stir up dirt against corporations, she created great change during the 1960s that resulted in the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency by 1972. Her book discusses how DDT nearly wiped out an entire species, the bald eagle, and by using this recognized American symbol was able to gain traction with the general public and even President John F. Kennedy. This changed everything for Carson. By 1963, she was on CBS Reports for an hour-long interview, calm, collected, and knowledgeable. Carson had a large impact on the field of public relations because she created and challenged the status quo. While her work was investigative journalism and based entirely on ethical muckraking, she used her knowledge to gain authority in a field that didn't value women. In the CBS documentary, they report that her book was radical and a challenge to the current times. Before the book even went to publishing, Monsanto and other pesticide companies shot fires back through press statements and advertising, calling her hysterical, a communist, and other such things. However, at the same time, historically, in Vietnam, we were using Agent Orange as a herbicide, pesticide to attack citizens of Vietnam. So, activists took hold of Silent Spring and used this to forward their own agenda, which pushed Silent Spring into a catalyst of an anti-war message. While Carson's intentions weren't focused on that, it definitely probably helped the book sales. Carson had worked with scientists in the field and had her facts checked before the book even hit publication. Companies like Monsanto utilized public relation tactics to defend themselves against muckraking journalists. These companies relied on one-way public relations while trying to gain support from both the U.S. government and the public. Carson, however, went a different route in presenting her case. She did her research, worked hard with scientists, and presented her case as calm, knowledgeable, and put together on CBS Reports, which aired on April 3, 1963. The man who presented on the side of agricultural chemical companies was Robert White Stevens. Robert White Stevens wasn't even a scientist, but a PR representative. Here's a clip from CBS Reports where you can see how Robert and Carson each responded and acted in the situation for the news.
We would return to the Dark Ages, and the insects and diseases and vermin would once again inherit the earth.
A barrage of poisons on the surface of the earth without making it unfit for all life. They should not be called insecticides, but biocides.
This alone would cause mass distrust with the public and frame any company badly because it demonstrates to the public that they don't value science, nor the public's ability to understand or be knowledgeable about facts. Only a few weeks later, Carson's findings were supported by the U.S. government as John F. Kennedy released their own report solidifying her facts. Another way that Carson allowed her book to be republished and re-released was in the New Yorker as a 3-part series, which made it accessible to just about anyone. This choice was not about profit, but to allow the story of Silent Spring to reach a broader audience than just people who read books, and in their own right creates publicity around herself and the book by bringing more eyes to the topic at hand. It's still accessible now. During the 1960s, we had entered a public be informed period that Bernays had suggested the country would. Carson used Silent Spring as a talking point and a call to action. Here's an excerpt from the book. A who's who of pesticides, therefore is of concern to us all. If we are going to live so intimately with these chemicals, eating and drinking them, taking them into the very marrow of our bones, we had better know something about their power. This call to action is a subtle manner that states that people should know what they are consuming. They should be informed of the dangers and implication of what this can or could do, and how this is currently affecting the world. She doesn't use scare tactics or threaten of a dark age like Robert White Stevens did on the CBS Reports interview. Rachel Carson's use of public relations involved leveraging her authority in the scientific community, her knowledge and skills as a writer and journalist, utilizing ethical journalistic tactics, and word of mouth through the activist community. This is what made her a successful public relations. By putting in the work and following through, she was able to create the Environmental Protection Agency, or inspire it, and do so much more for society.